Well, thank you, Ali. By the way, it's great getting to know you before as we began discussing the opportunity of sharing this information with you. And for me, it's a good morning. I'm sure for most of you, it's a good afternoon. And it's truly amazing that we are living in such a global community. I am coming live from Atlanta, Georgia in the United States, and it's a real honor for me to be part of the MILE webinar series. I want to thank you for joining me today on this Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship sponsored webinar. The topic of my presentation today is the Leader's Challenge, Keeping Customers for Life. And I'm going to tell you that in my experience, this is one of the most difficult things for leaders to understand, even in today's multifaceted, rapid changing environment. I've been involved, as Ali has said in my introduction, in various leadership positions most of my life. And I have spent most of the last 30 years, excuse me, in healthcare leadership. Many years ago, while a dean of students at a Midwestern medical school, I was appalled at how we were ignoring how physicians were to deliver their care in the patient setting. We were pretty competent in providing them knowledge of disease and health, but we missed in teaching them how to provide that care in a socially acceptable way in the patient setting. Excuse me. We have assumed that everyone entering medical school is an expert in social engagements, but this is not true. In my years of experience in healthcare, I have been shown that we are missing the mark as it relates to patient satisfaction within the healthcare setting. There's a clear disconnect between the patient's reality and that of the providers. It's not so much that providers don't want to do a good job or that they lack the technical skills. Rather, it's just that they don't know the behavioral economic factors associated with their interactions with patients. If there is a clear and glaring disconnect in healthcare, especially as it relates to the sacred physician-patient relationship, it must be true across most industries. In fact, it's my personal experience that has driven me to research and study how to make the customer experience better. Let me give you a couple examples. The first example is I went in recently to a convenience store while traveling. As I left the store, I was taken back by my experience so much that I spent hours dissecting what went on. I walked to the cooler, I pulled out a bottle of water, walked to the cash register, the clerk grabbed the bottle, scanned it, didn't even tell me what the price was. So I noticed it on the credit card pad. I inserted my card and walked out of the store with not one word spoken. A second example of this disconnect is I had many years ago an older friend who I was caring for who had a billing issue with a phone company. So she called to get it fixed. She got into one of these phone trees and was so frustrated that she could not press the buttons fast enough and didn't even know how to categorize her question, so she hung up. The language was foreign to her, not a foreign language in an actual sense, but rather their internal foreign language. They expected her to know their language, their terminology, their systems, as if they had never called in to determine the ease and simplicity of their own processes. I, as well, am forever frustrated trying to talk to a human, so I often hang up myself. The third example is really quite egregious, and you might say, what? But it's true. Recently, a doctor in Syracuse, New York, was disciplined for slapping his patients on their bare behinds and ridiculing them while they were under anesthesia. This is shocking. But what's even more shocking is the fact that this went on for many years. And even the people in the operating suite didn't call this into question, this kind of behavior. There was also the physician who took a selfie with comedian Joan Rivers as she was undergoing a simple and common procedure that went poorly, ultimately causing her death. We have a crisis, and mostly it's self-imposed. It is that most of us are unaware of what our customers want from their economic engagements with us. Often we assume that people will engage with us because they have to. In a sense, it's the old line, if you build it, they will come. It may be true of my convenience store experience, since there were no other ones around, but this is not true for most instances, because people today have choices, and people make those choices hundreds of times each day. Often leaders assume customer needs or desires based on their broken logic, and I put that in quotes because it is broken logic, because they're not looking into it deeply. Or their filter, it's like the phone company's inside jargon. We're expected to know what their words mean, even when we've not been trained or exposed to it. So in order to understand how we might solve these problems, we have to do a little bit of background work first. Every interaction with a customer is an economic engagement that takes place in a real social setting. One person to another, or one person with a technological system like the phone tree or the website. These social interactions are governed by a set of rules. We fail to think through the fact that there are a set of rules that govern social interactions. But if we utilize these things properly, these rules, the chances of a positive result is magnified. But we have a problem here. And the problem is that you may know the rules, but you may be applying them in an incorrect way. What I mean here is a business leader might know through their research or through their what they think is their personal experience, what they think people might desire. But technology or conditions have changed so rapidly that they're trying to meet customer needs with outdated plans or ideas. Their heart might be in the right place, but they've totally missed the boat. For years in healthcare, we have been beaten with a quality stick. I like to call it that because that's often what it is. We get beaten, and until we think in our heads and minds that quality should be number one. We've been told that all we need to do to meet customers' needs is to give them quality. But again, we have a problem. Yes, people want quality, but now we have moved into what Joseph Pine and James Gilmore called the experience economy. People want experiences in their economic engagements. To them, experiences are a distinct economic offering, as different from services as services are from goods. People will pay more to join in the experience, for example, like the Hard Rock Cafe. On my travels around the world with young people, they all want to go to the Hard Rock Cafe, and it's an experience that they feel comfortable with. Or here in the United States, Bass Pro, which is an outdoor store, or Cabela's, which is also an outdoor store selling sporting goods, you go into these places and there are fish swimming in aquarium and climbing walls and different kinds of experiences. The prices are a little higher than normal, but they're a great experience. I was struck with the concept of quality versus experience when I heard Dr. Fred Lee from Boston describe the difference an experience makes. I saw this on a TED Talk that he had provided a few years ago, and it has totally impacted my feelings about quality versus the experience. He said, imagine he was in the hospital for some blood work, and Sherry, the phlebotomist, the blood drawer, walks into the room and goes into script. And we're all good at doing the script. We know what we're told to do and we follow it. Hello, Mr. Lee. My name is Sherry, and I am here to take a blood sample. Please sit here on the edge of the bed. She proceeds to do her work without a word and neglects Dr. Lee's fear of the process. In the past, he's had people miss and have to stick him again. In other cases, I'm sure some of you will experience this, the rubber band that's tied around the upper arm often pinches the skin. Well, Sherry didn't miss, and she didn't pinch the skin. And upon completing the procedure, she said, quote, "Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there anything else I can do for you?" Unquote. Went back into the script again. By every measure that we presently use in healthcare to determine quality, this was a quality interaction. Now, Dr. Lee suggests a different way. Hello, Dr. Lee, my name is Sherry, and I'm here to get a blood sample for the physician. Please sit on the edge of the bed. Tell me, Dr. Lee, are you from around here? Do you have children? Tell me about your grandchildren. All the while, she is preparing him for the draw. She notices that he is somewhat reticent about the procedure, so she says, "Don't worry, Dr. Lee, I've been doing this for 15 years, and when the other phlebotomist can't find a vein, they call me. I'm known as Gentle Sherry. She found the vein, and she was so gentle, Dr. Lee didn't know she was done. Then she said, Dr. Lee, I'm all through for now. Is there something else I can do for you?" Then he says, in fact, yes. I know I have to have blood drawn tomorrow. Will you be the one doing it? I sure hope so. So both of these experiences were quality, yet one was an experience. So if we want customers for life, you have to give them a social experience that impacts them in a way that jolts them, in a sense of visceral gut reaction. This is the wow. I call this a significant emotional experiences. I know most of you have experienced these things where something so dramatic and so powerful happens that it changes your experience, it also changes your perspective, and it changes your expectations. So the big question is, how do we get there? Well, first of all, we need to understand the term behavioral economics. This is the study of the effects of psychological, social, cognitive, and emotional factors on the economic decisions of individuals and institutions. Every economic transaction is a social interaction. It's either person to person, as I mentioned before, or it's person to website, like Amazon or Walmart or eBay or whatever it might be. Or it's person to institution, which many of us understand, a person to a healthcare facility, of which I'm familiar, or it might be a person to a customer service department. Each engagement, however, can take two different perspectives. The first is what we call transactional. And in this particular case, this means I'll give you this if you give me that. You can see how it's a transaction. It's nothing more than a give and a take relationship. The second is what we call transformational. I'll give you this and it will transform you. You see the difference there. Since these behavioral economic factors are about two entities interacting, it would make sense that one should know their own psychological, social, cognitive, and emotional skills so that they can enhance their interactions with other entities. So what must be considered in order to make an impact with these people? The first is about culture. It is what one's worldview is. It's what they value. It's what they hold dear, and also what the customer holds dear. Let me give you a negative example. I'm sure some of you may remember quite recently the United Airlines customer service debacle when they overbooked the flight and ended up dragging a man off the flight, doing damage to his face in the process. To United Airlines, the passenger was an inanimate object instead of the reason for the existence of the organization. Somehow along the way, they lost their way. In fact, the CEO defended the action of the crew and blamed the customer. After all, they had a policy that had to be followed. So, do you know your values? This is one of the biggest questions that any leader within any organization must first resolve in their own mind. And the second is, do you know what your customers value? And I would say that in most cases, people assume what customers value rather than actually asking them what they value. In fact, this has so plagued me that I'm in the process of creating a research project that's going to look at global customer values, along the lines many years ago of what we call the Globe study that assessed different cultural views as it relates to leadership principles and practices and also factors. The next is, why do you exist? I don't know if any of you have ever read Simon Sinek's book, but I certainly hope you will consider it, called Start With Why. And Simon Sinek asked people, it's not so much what you do, but it's why. Why do you do what you do? And it took me many, many years to understand that of what I was and what my why was. I couldn't put it into words, but I finally discovered that my why is all about making people and things better. So everything that I do has a focus on improving and helping people. And in that process, I have to improve myself and to make sure that I'm growing throughout my existence. This is my overarching goal, my overarching purpose. And the next question about this in terms of cultural development is, do you know your boundaries? Where would you not pass regardless of the reward? This is a very difficult question that needs to be solved because it dramatically impacts the customers and the clients around you. So let's look at what customers generally want from their economic interactions. Now, these are broad categories and not some of the specifics found in some specialized interactions. But besides value, quality, and consistency, customers want just a few extra things that will catch them for life. Now, these two guys, Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, had been doing some research for the last 30 years, and some of you may know these two gentlemen. Their work is in the leadership field is foundational. They wrote the book called The Leadership Challenge back almost 25 years ago. And they wanted to know what followers expected of their leaders instead of the focus of what leaders expected of their followers, something that had been done for many years in the leadership research world. They have been researching the characteristics found in most admired leaders for the past 30 years. 4 characteristics stand out. Year after year, the results do not vary by demographical, organizational, or cultural dimensions. It is clear that there are a few essential character tests someone must pass before they're willing to follow. The first is honesty. 85% chose this as the most important characteristic. This is doing what one promised they would do, telling the truth, having ethical values and standards by which one lives. One must know their heart and truly believe what you are saying. The second characteristic is forward-looking. 70% of the people surveyed chose this one as the second most important characteristic. Having a sense of direction and a concern for the future of the organization and the relationship. One must connect their vision to yours and yours to theirs. And most of you might think, well, how does that relate into the everyday situations? How does the customer know that you're forward-looking? But if you're constantly looking for new and creative ways to run your organization and to give them the things that they're looking for, they will be excited about it. Notice that this is really about long-term interactions and not necessarily about short-term. I'll give you another example. A few years ago, I was traveling in rural Haiti. We had created a medical clinic in a rural community, and we had stopped into a convenience store. Again, my convenience store experiences are pretty funny, I guess. And I walked in to get another 500 milliliter bottled water. And I took it up to the counter, put it on the counter, and the gentleman finally talked to me, or this one talked to me, and he said, that will be $25 US. I said, are you kidding me? He said, oh no, $25 US. So I left the bottled water there and walked out, and my friend in the car asked me why I didn't have any water, and I told him the experience. Well, he ran right into the place to excoriate the short-term thinking and the damage done by this one act, taking advantage of somebody else in the short term. Now, the third characteristic is called inspiration, and 69% of the people selected this as the third most important characteristic. This is sharing the genuine enthusiasm, the excitement, and the energy you have about the exciting possibilities that are ahead for your organization. Showing people your passion for the cause. Listen, people aren't going to follow or be interested in something that is not inspiring. If you don't have the passion for it, you probably ought to consider looking for something else. And the final characteristic is being competent. 64% listed this as the fourth most important characteristic. This is about your track record, your ability to get things done, following through on your promises. You know your product and you know what others need. Now, let me tell you one thing. No other characteristic that was evaluated ever even broke the 40% market. So if you want to know what it is that attracts people, and this is found in most admired leaders, but you're leading in the customer relationship. These characteristics, if applied properly in your life, will attract people to you and your organization, and I would wager permanently with great loyalty if these are continued practices. Now, the key point is that you make the culture before, during, and after each encounter. Culture changes depending upon the interactions, what happens during that interaction. So remember, you make the culture before, during, and after each encounter with a patient. Recently, I was introduced to Francis Hutcheson, who's a famed Scottish philosopher. And he has said that the chief drive and purpose of the human will is the pursuit of happiness and the avoidance of misery. How true that is when you think about it. So, does your culture bring happiness or misery to your customers? That's a big question. And I would have to wager, in my experience in the healthcare setting, most cultures center around misery instead of bringing happiness to their customers, because they're stuck in particular purposes or particular policies and so forth. Now, United Airlines should have asked this question. Did anyone ever ask if the policy of overbooking was the right one? They could have apologized and made some other accommodation that would not have hurt the customer. But let me make this point very clear to you. Since every organization is made up of individuals, your organizational behavior is at best, now I want to say that again, your organization is a bunch of people, individuals, and together all those people come together to form a behavior that others see. And your organizational behavior is at best the conglomeration of all of those, and it will never be better than your best. Now, I know that sounds a little crazy, but think through that. Because the best in your organization is often diminished because of dilution. If you only have one individual in 10 within your organization who are operating at their best, then they're going to take the entire organization down because of dilution. So it's important for you to think through this. And here's the key. So regardless of your policy or your rules, is this what you want others to think of your organization? This example here with United Airlines. So we need to know ourselves. Now, at Duke University Medical School, I was brought in to help bring about a change in the surgical department as it related to professionalism standards. When we talk about professionalism, that's how well they're received by their by patients and within their team members. We realized through our work that change must happen one person at a time. And if you want to make a change and you want to make a difference and you want customers for life, then you need to start realizing it happens one person at a time. So we created what we call the professionalism intelligence model to determine how balanced people are across their cognitive, emotional, and leadership intelligences. That is, how one thinks and feels determines their actions. As you can see from the model on the side there, we're really interested in this balance between these three intelligences. Many times, people operate out of balance. They operate from their cognitive intelligence. I'm a smart physician, or I'm a smart boss, or I'm a smart engineer, or I'm intelligent. And yet they're weak on the emotional side in terms of how they interact. The key here is to be balanced around a determined set of virtues. This is what Duke had to do. And you'll notice in our model, virtue sits at the center. And this is what we value. And the organization, the surgical department, decided that integrity, compassion, and self-discipline among other things, would be those driving factors. They were then able to evaluate everything that happens within their organization around those virtues. So my question to you is, have you done this for your organization? Do you know what you value? Do you know the standards to which you will hold all of your people and operations? Now, our professionalism intelligence model identifies gaps in what one thinks as compared to others through a 360-degree assessment tool. And once a person becomes self-aware of their gaps, they can develop strategies to overcome the lacking quality and practice modifications of the strategies after they're tested. This is a loop, a training loop of self-assessment leads to self-awareness, which leads to self-betterment strategies, which leads to self-assessment. It's a loop that happens over and over again. One problem we uncovered in our process was that people need to be willing to change. And this means that they have to be dedicated to self-betterment. If we use goal setting as a benchmark for betterment, in the US, only 20% of people set goals. This was astounding to me when I heard that. And of that 20%, only 30% accomplished them. That means that only 6 in 100 are dedicated to self-betterment. Are you one of the 6%? I had to ask myself that question, and I made a decision that I wanted to be. However, in light of this discovery, we are astounded at the success of our program in recreating culture. I don't have the time here to fully discuss our program, but let me give you one insight. We discovered a culture of fear within the organization. People were afraid to ask for help. That is a dangerous place to be for a healthcare organization, lest they be seen as weak. I mentioned this to the division chair of the surgery department. He was initially angry at my observation. He thought that toxic was too strong of a term. I mentioned that there's a continuum of culture, hell at one end and nirvana on the other, and that his organization was closer to nirvana, but still needed some work. He was struck to his heart and went before the entire division and asked for forgiveness. Now, this is a big move to make, a big cultural change in one of the leading institutions in the world as it relates to healthcare. So you can imagine our program has impacted providers and patients alike in ways that seem impossible. Now, to get back to what one must consider in order to make an impact aside from culture, we need to look at modeling behavior. Now, I'm sorry, this picture here I had to use was an example of my grandson. Just the other day, he has seen his dad work on his cars over and over again. Yet at 2.5 years old, he has already formed his modeling behavior. You are to do what you expect of others. You never violate this principle. This is the key thing here. For you only get one chance with customers. You must make this one of your highest values as a leader and as an organization. Let me give you a quick example. My first car was an Oldsmobile Starfire. Now, that's quite a long time ago. I was just out of college and able to purchase my first car from General Motors. Yet at 30,000 miles, the engine failed. Now, I took it to the dealer, and the dealer said, well, son, it's your fault. And they blamed me for one of their main engine bearings failing in my car. They never took responsibility and blamed me. Well, I have never since purchased a GM auto. And I have many other choices. And one is, even now today, even with quality standards improved, that significant emotional experience impacted me permanently. Let's look at another consideration here. The next is what we call being present. A good friend of mine, Dr. Joe Doty, who's the executive director of the Fagan Institute, Leadership Institute, that is, at Duke University, suggested this process as we further developed the professionalism intelligence model. He said to consider when engaging in behavioral economics, one must simply ask, are you present? One is either present or they're not present. Are you distracted or are you disinterested in the present conversation? The experience begins when one is present. The key here is to never let anything get in the way of being present. An example of this is how physicians are forced into looking at computers instead of patients as they enter information into the electronic medical records, or in the local store or business where people are too engaged in their cell phones or their or other things, or phone calls or conversations with other employees, removes their focus. Another consideration that we'll look at is to communicate your values. You need to stick to your values all of the time, even when it hurts financially. You never take the easy route. The key here is to never, never, never violate your values. And you might wonder why I have this picture of the Volkswagen, but many of you will recall within the last year or so that Volkswagen diesel scandal that has certainly impacted their United States sales, but is also a global issue, in which the leadership in a room had a problem, and yet in that small room, somebody came up with a suggestion that the easiest fix for problematic emissions equipment was to program a cheat into the system that would turn on the emissions equipment only when the computer detected that it was being tested. Now, I don't know where that came from in that room, but somebody needed to think through that a little bit more clearly. When in normal conditions, the emissions were 30 to 40 times worse than during testing. This mistake has, to date, cost Volkswagen $18 billion in fines in the US alone. What were they thinking during their engineering meeting when the fix was discussed? Who allowed the cheat to reign? This was a major values failure that could have been missed. So our final consideration in making an impact with our customers is to give people an experience. Nobody does it better than Walt Disney. And we are to do more for people than what is expected. And you're to engage your customers. You're to learn from them. You're to study them. Your key here is to be genuine and not fake at your learning. This requires that your organization become what Peter Senge calls a learning organization. Never stop learning. So in conclusion, there isn't really sufficient time in this webinar to fully vet this topic, but let me say that from my personal experience, I have seen the impact these principles can make in bringing about cultural change, even in one of the most respected healthcare institutions in the world, Duke University Medical School. So if you want customers for life, it's incumbent upon all business leaders to know the rules of customer engagement for themselves and to teach them to your staff, your fellow employees, to inculcate them within your business culture in a way that transforms your organization and its purpose in the lives of others. And then finally, refine the rules each and every day, make the experience better tomorrow than it is today. Now, if you do this, I can assure you that you will have customers for life that will preserve your integrity from outside or inside attacks. They will come to your to your help and your reputation when necessary. Well, thank you for your time. Now, I will take a few questions, and I hope this has been a helpful experience for you, and I'd be willing to answer any questions offline if you have them. This is how you can contact me in the United States. My email address is here. So at that point, Ali will take some questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Berry, for a very, very intriguing presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answers. So if you have any questions, you could either insert it in the question box or you could equally raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console. Please click on it if you have any questions. Or let me go to the question box. There are a couple of them already posted. The first one, Doctor, how do you find what your organization values as Duke University Medical School did in the surgery department?
Good question. One of the things that interested me, as you'll remember when I talked about the values of integrity and self-discipline and compassion, the organization goes through what's called a Q-sort process. Everyone within the organization was allowed to make presentations or determinations of what they valued. And this particular process takes all of these things, 25, 30 different values or virtues, and sorts them from most important for the whole organization to those of least importance. And together, your organization, your leader, and not just the leader, but others within your organization need to be asked about these particular virtues or values, the kinds of things that you as a whole organization value. And with everybody's involvement in this, you come to a consensus about what you value. This process doesn't take a lot of energy. It is one that you have to be committed to, however, and my organization, of course, can help you do that. But there are other ways. You can ask clearly to include your customers in the process of what you value, because as I mentioned before, what they value is just as important to an organization as what you value. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me unmute. We have a caller raise a hand. We have Dr. Mahmoud, Mr. Mahmoud Sharaf. Brother Mahmoud Sharaf, I'm trying to unmute you. Yes, brother, you've raised your hand. Could you please introduce yourself and ask the question? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Mahmoud Sharaf. I'm from Saudi Arabia here, and I'm in charge of a huge organization of care. Really, I would like to thank you for this, very informative time we spent with you. And what I would like to say that, as you know, that healthcare is a dynamic industry. The values now are changing. The customers' learning curve is also getting higher and higher. What would be the best to the healthcare organization to benchmark with the competitors, or what would be the other source to benchmark in order really to reach this excellency, if I could call it? Thank you.
If you could just please, the last part of your question, if you could repeat it for me, please.
Now, you are asking us, sir, to really learn and study and know the values. Now here, because of this dynamic industry in healthcare, what would be your suggestion? Do we need to benchmark to know these values and the expectation of the customers from our competitors? Or you would recommend other source to benchmark in order to have a better learning and understanding of the expectations and the values and what the customers are looking for?
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you for the, I lost a little bit of the audio there for a minute. We have in healthcare been beat with the benchmark stick as well as I mentioned, earlier about the quality statement. I think the difficulty that we often find ourselves in is that when we benchmark, we may be benchmarking against the wrong things. We may be benchmarking apples and oranges. We might be talking about different things because your particular community or your healthcare system might be different than another. That's so clear and so true in the metropolitan Atlanta area, because all of these metro hospitals are serving roughly 5 million people that live in the metro area. Yet you go outside of our area into the rural areas, you have these very small hospitals that have different needs. And it's very difficult to use benchmarking, because if you're one of those particular institutions, you're benchmarking against something that might not be true for your organization. So yes, there is value, I should say, to using benchmark for HAIs, hospital-acquired infections, or for procedures, or how well you're doing with mortality rates, or infant mortality rates, whatever it might be. Those are important, but what I'm talking about here is a little bit different. It's knowing your customers and the people that come into your institution. What is it that they particularly value? And I'm not against the benchmarking as long as you benchmark against yourself. I know that sounds kind of funny, but we often don't compare, even within our own institution, how well we're succeeding. I want to caution one thing. Here in the United States, everybody's talking about HCAHPS and about how well are the customers satisfied. But the problem is they're asking the wrong questions. The questions they're asking are, was the food good? Did somebody greet you at the door? Did the physician come in with a clean, white, pressed, starched lab coat? They're not asking the kinds of things that are really of great importance. Did I get an experience? Did the people talk to me? Did the people listen to me? And often we miss that part of the process. So I hope that helps answer your question a little bit. Did you need a little bit further input?
No, it is very clear. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad Sharaf, for your question. And let me move to another question we have in the box. How do you suggest that one go about assessing what customers want from their experience with my organization?
Good question. I think it's similar to what I was just saying to our brother a few minutes ago. It's finding out what works within your particular organization. I get the picture. Let me tell you the most fascinating experience I ever had. I was introduced to a hospital system back a few years ago in New Jersey, and they were very proud of their separate hospitals. And I went in, the chief executive, the administrator of the hospital, took me and a partner on a tour of the hospital. And what amazed me was this person and how this person was received. It was as if I was with a rock star. We walked into the hospital, and people from all parts, as we walked down the hallways, "Oh, Mr. Lyons, how you doing, Mr. Lyons?" And "Oh, Mr. Lyons, I hope you had a great weekend, Mr. Lyons." And now this was a large hospital. In order for this kind of thing to take place, this person had to have engaged in the lives of the people who were employees. But not only that, he would go into rooms with patients or see family members, and people knew about Mr. Lyons because of his interaction with them in the community. And too often, business leaders are afraid to engage their customers because they're afraid of what they might hear. The truth is that that's the only way for an organization to really know where its issues are. And that is to ask, to seek, to talk, to communicate, to engage. And I'm going to tell you, it impacted me so much how Mr. Lyons responded. I have, reconsidered how I engage people within my institutions, and it requires transparency. It requires what I like to call a teachable spirit, meaning that if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, this is a problem," or "You've got an issue here," that instead of screaming and hollering or saying, you're dumb or you're stupid, you don't know what we do here, of receiving that information that would be used in a positive way for change. This happened to me in my life many years ago at the medical school. I had a student come in and just berated me from one end to the other about the problems he was experiencing in the student affairs area. And I was new to the position, and after that student left, he called me every awful name in the book. I did none of this. I had only been there a few weeks, and I'll never forget my boss, the dean, sticking his head in my office, because this was a very public place, and he says, "It sounds to me like you have an opportunity." And it has absolutely impacted my life forever, is that I know I have an opportunity to be better, to do better. And so it requires that I be willing to receive that correction. So getting out into the public sector, getting out into the group, the people, your customers, and asking them questions. Now, I mentioned this before, it has to be genuine and not fake. A lot of times, a manager of a restaurant will come up and say, "How's your food?" Well, I know they got to do that. So I don't really feel like it's genuine in nature. But I can assure you that once you do that, you will make an impact that will forever change your organization, because your employees will see you modeling behavior, and they too will step up to it.
Well, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Dr. Berry, any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss that?
I just want to say thank you so much for you all being engaged in the webinar today. I know there's a big challenge for all of you out there, and I know it's difficult. Competition really drives people to have many different choices. But I can tell you the organizations that do it well are those that are committed to serving people that are their customers. So I encourage you to do that. And if you have any questions that might pop up later, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be very happy to receive your emails or your phone calls. We could do even online conversations if you'd like. And I just wish you all very well, and I hope you have a wonderful evening tonight. So thank you, Ali. It's been a pleasure.
Well, the feelings are mutual. Thank you very much, Dr. Berry. And I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for taking the time to deliver this excellent webinar through our platform. So once again, thank you very much. And thank you all of those who attended this webinar. We are recording it. Please stay tuned to webinar.mal.org to learn about our upcoming programs, webinars, and to equally access the recorded versions. With that note, I would like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.